One of the things I used to do when I was a high school teacher, and I taught ethics, was I would start the year with lots of activities around getting to know oneself and the others in the class. Because it didn't do much good to study ethics and decision-making about right and wrong and good and bad until one was a little bit aware of the subjective person making those decisions. So we did a number of things to be a little bit introspective and to get to know each other and to build trust with one another. Some of those I've done with you here, right in the church, such as being blindfolded and having someone walk you through a maze by voice directions, right? Doing a human knot and untangling all the arms. The one this led up to, the final activity of this type I did every year, was a trust fall. How many of you have ever done the trust fall, right? So if you haven't done it, you cross your arms and you fall backwards from a chair or a table or a stage or whatever you're using, and people hold their arms together or cross, make a net, and they catch you. Now, even after all the trust building, as soon as I described the activity, I got, "Mr. L, you crazy." They knew I would pull stuff like this, but at first everybody thought it was nuts. And then I laid on the trust building. I said, "All right, but first y'all gonna catch me." And at that time, I was even bigger than I am now. The most I ever weighed, over 300 pounds. I said, "If you can catch me, catching any of you is no problem." They always caught me. There was never a problem. Their arms got right to the ground sometimes, lower than anybody else, but I was always safe. And really, even though some people took a while for the trust to build in them as classmate after classmate went, eventually everybody gave it a shot. It was a lot to ask of people. And sometimes people will say, "Don't do this activity anymore. It's a little traumatic for some people." And that may be so, but I didn't find it that way. I found it was a big group builder of bringing in people, especially those who are a little less trustful and a little more scared. They left the activity with the most growth and more confidence in themselves and more trust in their classmates. And part of the activity, that one and the others like it, was to get them to attune more to their classmates and a little bit more to themselves. Relationship guru John Gottman says that trust in any relationship is built over time. He says that trust is a matter of how attuned or in sync or working together or matched up or on the same wavelength partners are. And he uses this term attuned to stand for awareness, turning toward, tolerance, understanding, non-defensive responding, and empathy. Trust building requires being aware of the other's needs, likes, preferences, wants, desires, struggles, fears, anxieties, joys. Trust means turning toward the other when difficulties arise, not taking your ball or your wedding ring or something and going home and refusing to engage. Trust mandates tolerance. Tolerance of the other's imperfections. We are all incomplete and imperfect, but if the other has to live up to your idea of what they need to do to be perfect or even to be good, getting to trust is difficult, if not impossible. And your partner or the other you're in relationship with will always be disappointing you. The prayer of St. Francis asks us to seek first to understand instead of seeking first to be understood. When there is a misunderstanding and lack of awareness and turning away and intolerance, we must do our best to be non-defensive when our shortcomings are brought to our attention. Better to learn about how we've missed the mark than to put up a defensive wall that keeps us from hearing feedback and might help us do better and repair the hurt. Trust requires empathy. The reality is, as a reflection question from last month's theme on possibility pointed out, that both our loved one and our loathed one may be doing the very best that they can. When we practice empathy, we try as much as possible to feel what the other might be feeling. When we practice empathy, we are constantly reminded that others struggle and suffer just like we do. You cannot build trust without engagement. It is an emergent process where many small and simple interactions add up and create a complex reality. Trust is built one simple act of good faith at a time, one small good experience at a time. A smile, a hello, a holding open a door, a conversation. They build upon one another. Trust has been defined as a willingness to be vulnerable and exposed. Will I allow myself to be vulnerable and exposed to you and what you say or do and how you treat me? We as ministers, especially in this day and age, face a problem of trust just by showing up in our role. Many people have been hurt by religion. Many people see the hypocrisies of so many clergy, the pedophile issues in the Catholic Church, clergy misconduct in other ways, and just being one of those people makes it hard sometimes for people to trust you at all. And yet this is not the only role that faces this issue. Teachers face this role. Social workers, therapists face this. Lawyers face it, right? Many people in many different roles where they work with others and others' pain in the human condition can experience not being trusted just by the fact of who they are. Interestingly, or maybe obviously, when we stop and think about it, trust has a biological component. Trust and distrust are wired into us. We have instincts that will automatically trust someone who looks like us more than someone who doesn't. Psychologists have done studies that show there are certain ways eyes and the mouth appears in a face that makes people all over the world in many different cultures think a face is trustworthy or untrustworthy. We respond to psychological cues about trust, a lot of them subconscious. When someone is all dressed up, whatever our culture considers all dressed up, we tend to trust them more than someone our culture considers kind of shabby looking. When someone has a good reputation, others trust that person. We tend to trust them, even if they're not trustworthy. Just because someone has the right eyes and mouth, they might not be trustworthy. Just because someone wears the right suit, they might not be trustworthy. Just because others trust somebody doesn't mean that person is trustworthy either. The trust is a complex emergent process that we build over time. Yet we're wired to make immediate judgments, evolutionarily speaking, for our own safety, who we can trust and not trust. Research shows that political orientation is correlated to trust. It's correlated to how strongly people feel emotionally and physically disgust. In this month's Atlantic magazine, Kathleen McAuliffe reports that studies show, quote, a strong disgust sensitivity goes hand in hand with traditionalism, religiosity, support for authority, and distrust of outsiders. This is a partial explanation for our current social climate. There's a lot of people in our country who don't trust anyone who doesn't look or think just like them. And then there's another group of people who don't trust those people because they don't trust anybody. And then this group doesn't trust that group who doesn't trust them for not trusting anybody. Lack of trust can be a horrible spiral. In her article, The Yuck Factor, McAuliffe writes, quote, at a deep symbolic level, some researchers speculate disgust may be bound up with ideas about us and them and about whom we instinctively trust and don't trust. It takes so much to build trust. So many smaller interactions that grow to bigger interactions, that grow to more important interactions. And as much as it takes to build trust, trust gets wiped out in an instant. One mistake, one misstep, one wrong word, one time you don't follow through, one time you break a promise. And even if we want to keep trusting somebody, subconsciously we go from trust to distrust, worthy to unworthy. No matter how trustworthy we may have been before or they may have been before. And this is one of the reasons in Unitarian Universalism we push covenant as the basis of religion and coming together in community. Because we know that promises we make to each other are going to be broken. The most important thing about covenant isn't making the promise, it's repairing the promise when it's broken. Trusting that the other person will have enough love and trust in the relationship to go through the pain of the repair, of the rebuilding. That's the difficult part about covenant, and it's usually the part most people don't want to engage in. We like covenant to be a set of words in an order of service or a poster on the wall, but the rebuilding of it, the repairing fractured trust, is something almost all of us will almost instinctively walk away from rather than toward. And it's why, with the lofty ideals of our Unitarian Universalism, that is what's really at the heart. The rebuilding trust when it's broken, the recovenanting. I want to encourage all of us to do our best to attune to each other or to reattune to each other. All times of change and growth bring with them many opportunities for tuning in and attuning, or turning away and untuning. So let's enter a time of turning toward each other in the covenant our faith calls us to. Assume best intentions. I think our future individually, our futures, and our future as a community, any community's future, depends on how much trust they can build and how willing they are to repair trust when broken. Because trust is an emergent process and is built through many smaller, trustworthy actions, we're going to build trust today with chocolate communion. I am literally going to come around to you with the chocolate today. And I'm going to put the chocolate in your hand as a sign that I also put my trust in your hands. And I hope you will do the same.